Welcome to this deep dive. We're tackling the California Gold Rush today. And, you sent over this fascinating history podcast episode about how it all unfolded. So we're ready to, dig in.
Yeah,
We're going beyond just, the whole striking it rich thing. We're really trying to unearth those, everyday lives, the challenges, the unexpected turns that shaped this whole era.
yeah, it's a period that's often romanticized, right?
Yeah.
But in reality, it was this incredibly complex mix of ambition, hardship, societal transformation. I mean, the gold rush, it wasn't simply about, finding gold. It was about creating a society in the face of some really extraordinary circumstances.
Yeah. I love that, the complex mix. And, when you think like a gold rush, you might picture, those rugged prospectors. But our source material really paints a much more nuanced picture. Like, for example, there's Sarah Royce. She traveled west with her husband back in 1849. And, she had this dream of like a proper wooden store with a cozy kitchen and a dining room. But finding someone to build it during that whole gold frenzy, it was impossible. So she
Wow.
ended up just settling for a tent. It just makes you wonder how many other dreams were kind of put on hold during that time.
It's a great example. It really highlights the scarcity of women and families in those early years.
Yeah.
It wasn't just about, extracting gold. It was about building a society from scratch in this incredibly chaotic environment. And Royce's story shows us that, resourcefulness and adaptability were just as valuable as any mining tool.
It definitely challenges that, lone prospector image, doesn't it? And speaking of challenging expectations, the source tells the story of Luzina Wilson. She was an entrepreneur. She started a restaurant in a tent serving up meals to those hungry miners.
Oh,
And get this, she even became a banker.
that's amazing. Wilson's story really underscores those unique opportunities that the gold rush presented. It allowed individuals, regardless of gender, to kind of carve their own paths and succeed in these unconventional ways. It really challenges us to think about the gold rush not just as this mad dash for riches, but as this period of social and economic dynamism.
Yeah, it's fascinating to see how those individual stories connect to those bigger societal shifts. And speaking of shifts, San Francisco's growth during this time was pretty phenomenal, right? It brought prosperity, but also these devastating fires, rampant crime, and this clash of values between the newcomers and that more transient population.
Yeah, Clash speaks volumes about the era's social transformation. I mean, you had people arriving with dreams of striking it rich, but also those who were seeking a fresh start, a chance to build a new society. And that tension between these groups really shaped California's future. It raised questions about the balance between individual freedom and, that need for order. Questions that we grapple with even today, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. It makes you realize how the gold rush wasn't just some isolated event. It really set the stage for some of the challenges that we face today. And then there's that whole environmental impact to consider. I was really struck by the story of that tin myth back in 1853. He was nervously assembling a water cannon, the dawn of hydraulic mining. It was revolutionary, but it came at this huge environmental cost. The
Oh.
source describes hillsides stripped, bare trees, uprooted valleys flooded with mud. It's a pretty jarring image. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's a poignant example of how progress can have unintended consequences, right? And this shift to hydraulic mining, it really signaled the end of an era. It marked a transition from those individual prospectors to these large-scale industrial mining operations. And with that came a shift in focus from individual effort to capital and technology. It's like the end of the individual prospector's dream in a way.
It makes me think about the social consequences too. If individual miners were being replaced by these big operations, who was really benefiting?
That's a great question. The sources highlight how this transition created a new class of wealthy elites. It further widened that gap between the haves and the have-nots. This theme of economic inequality that emerged during the gold rush, it resonates throughout history. It often accompanies those periods of rapid technological advancement. It really compels us to consider, who truly profits from those leaps forward.
It makes you think about the true cost of progress, right? Both socially and environmentally. It sounds like the gold rush wasn't always about striking it rich for most people. So what was the real allure? What kept drawing people to California?
That's where we start to see the gold rush as something much bigger than the gold itself. It represented reinvention opportunity, a chance at a new life. It was a gamble, no doubt, but one that embodies that American spirit of risk-taking self-reliance. People were willing to risk everything for a chance at something better, even if it meant hardship and uncertainty.
I'm struck by the sheer diversity of people who were drawn to the gold rush, too. The source mentions people coming from all over the world, all walks of life. It must have been this incredibly unique melting pot of cultures and ambitions.
Yeah, the diversity of experience is really key to understanding the social dynamics of the era. And these boom towns, especially San Francisco, they were incredibly dynamic and, as you said, chaotic.
Yeah.
You have this collision of cultures and expectations, creating this really complex social landscape where people were constantly adapting to new challenges and new ways of life.
It must have been a fascinating, albeit challenging time to live. All those dreams, all that ambition, all crammed into these rapidly growing boom towns. The energy must have been palpable.
That energy, it was definitely there. But like we were saying before, it wasn't always, positive energy. There was this undercurrent of tension, too, this clash between, those who kind of thrived in the chaos and those who really yearned for more order.
Yeah, that clash, it really comes to life in the source material. Especially in San Francisco. You have these rugged miners, gamblers, saloon owners. They built the city from the ground up. And then this new wave of settlers arrives, families, merchants, aspiring politicians, and they're determined to impose order on this wild
It
frontier.
wasn't just, personalities clashing. It was a fundamental disagreement about what California should become.
Mhm.
On the one hand, you have this embodiment of rugged individualism, that spirit of the Wild West. And on the other, this growing desire for stability, respectability, those conventions of a more settled society.
And in the middle of all this, you have individuals caught between these two worlds. The source tells this story about a madam trying to fend off a raid by a newly reformed U.S. Marshal. Talk about a symbol of the changing times.
It's a perfect illustration of how those personal transformations mirrored those larger societal shifts.
Yeah.
This marshal, once a familiar face in the city's less reputable establishments, he experiences a religious conversion and becomes this zealous enforcer of the law. Much to the dismay of those who profited from the city's wilder side, it's a reminder that the gold rush affected people on a personal level too, forcing them to confront their own values and beliefs as things changed around them.
It makes you wonder how people navigated those shifting social currents. And speaking of navigating change, the source mentions this group called the Committee of Vigilance. They basically became a vigilante force, rounding up criminals, holding trials, even carrying out executions.
Yeah, the Committee of Vigilance, they're a fascinating study in that whole struggle between law and order, mob justice, and the desire for control in this rapidly changing society. Their actions, while often harsh, stem from this deep anxiety about the perceived lawlessness of the time and the inability of traditional institutions to really maintain order.
It sounds like a pretty extreme reaction. Were they really necessary? Or were they just adding to the chaos?
Well, their motives were complex, and their actions had both positive and negative consequences. On the one hand, they did contribute to a decrease in crime and a sense of security in San Francisco. But on the other, their methods were often, extra legal and brutal. It raises serious questions about due process and the rule of law.
It's a good reminder that history isn't always black and white. Even those with good intentions can sometimes make questionable choices, especially in times of upheaval and uncertainty. And in the midst of all this, you had individuals trying to make a life for themselves. Like Belle Cora, the notorious madam. She was powerful and wealthy, but even she wasn't immune to that changing social landscape.
Belcora's story is both tragic and revealing of the power dynamics at play. Despite her wealth and connections, she couldn't protect her lover from the Committee of Vigilance. It highlights how even those who thrived in times of chaos could become victims when the rules of the game changed. It also shows how women, despite achieving a level of success and independence during the gold rush, were still vulnerable within those existing power structures.
It's a stark reminder that the gold rush wasn't just about striking it rich. It was about creating a new society and forging a new identity for California. And that process, it was messy, complicated, often brutal, but it was also a period of incredible resilience and innovation. Earlier, we talked about Sarah Royce adapting to life in a tent and Luzina Wilson building her business empire. They weren't just surviving, they were thriving in this unpredictable environment.
Exactly. Their stories, along with countless others, demonstrate that human capacity for resilience and adaptation. The gold rush forced people to think outside the box, to find creative solutions to these unprecedented challenges. And it wasn't just about individual grit. Communities had to adapt and innovate as well. Take, for instance, the development of new mining techniques, the establishment of new laws and institutions, even the transformation of San Francisco from a chaotic tent city into this bustling metropolis. These were collective achievements driven by necessity and the desire for a better future.
It's fascinating how the gold rush spurred advancements in so many areas, not just mining. It seems like it laid the groundwork for California's future in many ways.
You're absolutely right. The gold rush wasn't just a flash in the pan. It set in motion a chain of events that continues to shape California today. And it's also worth noting that its impact wasn't limited to California. The gold rush triggered these ripple effects across the nation and around the world, influencing migration patterns, economic trends, technological innovations, and even cultural attitudes.
It's incredible to think about the far-reaching consequences of an event that started with the discovery of a few gold nuggets. And speaking of legacies, it's interesting to see how the fates of some of the gold rush's key figures kind of mirrored that boomer bust nature of the era itself. Take Sam Brannan, for example. He was the man who helped ignite the gold rush, the first millionaire of California, and yet he ended up dying penniless and largely forgotten.
Brandon's story, much like the boomtowns themselves, serves as a cautionary tale about the fleeting nature of fortune and the importance of adapting to changing circumstances. He amassed a fortune during those early frenzied years, but he failed to adapt as the easy gold disappeared and the nature of the California economy evolved.
It's a reminder that success in a gold rush doesn't always translate into long-term prosperity. It makes you wonder, what about the man who actually discovered gold? What happened to James Marshall?
Marshall's fate is particularly poignant. He was in many ways a victim of his own discovery. The gold rush he sparked kind of swept over him, destroying his livelihood and leaving him behind as others profited from his find. He symbolizes that complex relationship between individual contributions and collective outcomes, and that uneven distribution of rewards during those periods of rapid social and economic change.
It seems like the gold rush itself became this unstoppable force transforming lives and landscapes with little regard for the individuals caught in its wake. But beyond the individual stories, what about the broader impact of this event? How did the gold rush shape California, the nation, and even the world?
Yeah, it really is amazing to think about how all those, individual stories weave into this bigger gold rush narrative. We've talked about the human drama, the social upheavals, the economic transformations, but what about the gold rush's lasting impact? How are its echoes still felt today? Well, the gold rush's legacy, it's multifaceted and continues to shape California in these really profound ways. One of the most significant and enduring consequences was that, dramatic alteration of California's natural landscape. Remember those hydraulic mining operations we talked about earlier? They left behind this legacy of, scarred hillsides, altered waterways, ecological damage that we're still dealing with today.
It's a stark reminder that progress often comes at a cost, and sometimes that cost isn't fully understood until much later. The environmental consequences of the gold rush, they unfolded over decades, even generations. It makes you think about how we measure progress and prosperity.
Absolutely. It raises those really important questions about the true cost of economic growth. The gold rush brought immense wealth to California, but it also left behind that legacy of environmental degradation. And that tension between economic development and environmental sustainability, it's something we're still wrestling with today, not just in California, but globally.
It's a timely issue for sure, especially as we face those challenges of climate change and resource depletion. But looking beyond the environmental impact, the gold rush also fundamentally reshaped California's economy. It spurred this period of really rapid growth and development, leading to new industries, the expansion of transportation networks, the rise of cities like San Francisco.
The gold rush basically catapulted California from this sparsely populated agricultural region into a vibrant economic powerhouse. And it attracted people from all over, creating this diverse and dynamic society that continues to define California's character today. It also positioned California as this global center for innovation and entrepreneurship, a reputation that persists to this day.
It's remarkable to consider how all those economic and social changes are intertwined. And what about the cultural impact? The gold rush seems like it played a role in shaping the very identity of California. It fostered that, spirit of risk-taking self-reliance, that belief that anything is possible, qualities that we still associate with that California dream.
Yeah, the gold rush, it gave birth to this mythology, a narrative of adventure, opportunity, and reinvention that continues to draw people to California. It's a story that's been romanticized and embellished over time, but it also contains those kernels of truth about the human spirit, the allure of the unknown, and the enduring power of hope. And that narrative has really shaped California's cultural identity in these profound ways.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into the California Gold Rush, what's the most important takeaway you'd like to leave our listener with?
I think the California Gold Rush, with all its, triumphs and tragedies, it serves as a powerful reminder that history isn't just this collection of, dusty facts and dates. It's a living force that shapes our present and influences our future. And by understanding the past, we gain valuable insights into, who we are, where we came from, and the challenges and opportunities that lie ahead.
It's like looking in the rearview mirror to better navigate the road ahead. And maybe, just maybe, by learning from the mistakes and successes of those who came before us, we can create a future that's both prosperous and sustainable. A future where the pursuit of progress doesn't come at the expense of our environment or our shared humanity. That's certainly something worth thinking about.
Absolutely. And on that note, we've reached the end of our deep dive into the California gold rush. Thanks for joining us on this journey, and we hope you found it enlightening.
And remember, the next time you hear the words gold rush, think beyond just the glitter and the gold. Think about the people, the stories, the struggles, and those enduring legacies that continue to shape our world today. Until next time, keep exploring.